Good evening. Good evening. It's your girl Wanda God's coming to you live. And today I have my illustrious guest that I've been promising you guys for quite some time. Neither one of us were feeling our best, but we were determined to make this interview happen today. Singletary a double heart valve replacement surgery with a bypass in there. He'll explain that in great detail because I always mess it up. He
No,
is an HIV positive black male, and he also has a podcast called Positive the Series. So please go
emphasis
to
on positive.
YouTube and look for Positive the Series and subscribe to his channel. And Jerome and I have been brothers and sisters, friends, whatever you want to call it, for over 35 years. We went to the illustrious Baltimore City College. I still
Yeah,
wear my ring as old as I am.
I lost mine. Yeah,
And if
but it's
you
in my heart
hear,
forever.
if you see when I'm talking a little delay before I respond to Jerome, that's what I'm doing. I'm playing this on my phone so that I don't give you guys an echo. So, before I get started with Jerome, of course, I have to let you know that my look today has
Flawless.
come in makeup by Yolando's Church Girl palette. And this is a very neutral palette for my conservative young ladies. And she is really a beauty. And that's the look today. So,
You look
this is
fantastic.
Jerome Singletary. And this
Hello,
is Wanda.
Wanda.
I don't know if I had the camera.
It's gorgeous.
I have to try. If you go to Plan and Makeup by Yolando.com and use my code WANDA at checkout, you can save you a few coins, okay?
Thank
So
you.
hello, my handsome friend. How are you?
Hello, my beautiful sister. I just want to say thank you for having me on your show. And also, it's funny because I'm looking at how beautiful you look this evening, and it just reminds me of when I was awakened one of several times while I had my little vacation at, I call it Hotel University of Maryland. And when I woke up at one point, some of the nurses were saying to me, your wife is absolutely gorgeous. And I was like, wife? Who are they referring to? I thought they might have been talking about my aunt. And they were referring to you, that you had come and you sat by my bedside and you sat vigil with me while I was on ventilator. And yeah, you didn't disappoint because the photographs, you were just absolutely gorgeous. So I was very, very, very flattered and quite taken by the fact that they thought that I could pull such a beautiful queen as yourself. So kudos, kudos. So let's I guess we can.
Oh, thank you, bro.
You're welcome. No, you
Nicole is on
are.
the line and she said hello and love y'all.
Love you more, Nicole. Another city sister. Are we just going? Is this just going to be the city college reunion for the class of '89? I'm cool with that. I love you guys so much. You guys have really. First of all, I just want to say I think that this is sort of a wonderful way to kind of bring things full circle because when I first discovered that I was going to have this procedure and I brought it to you guys' attention, and immediately Dr. Nicole and Reverend James, also classmates of ours and very close friends, immediately you guys are all rallied to create a prayer circle in my name and my honor that we all got together and met with virtually every week up until the point at which I had to actually go to the hospital on February 8th to have the procedure done. And then you guys continue to meet and pray over me and for me virtually during what was only supposed to be a 7 to 10 day stint, but ended up being 6.5 weeks later. But you guys sat vigil and you just kept me connected to our mighty Father. And I want to tell you that there is nothing that I could say, that there's no gift that I could give that could possibly express the depth and the level of my poor little mended heart, the fullness and the richness with which you guys have just filled me by your love and your encouragement and your support and your faithfulness in our Almighty Father to bring me through this procedure, because it was scary and rough as well, you know. Ooh,
You
goodness.
know, when I came that day, you weren't in the best place, and your nurse made me aware of that. And I was scared. I was crying, and I was like, mm-mm, we gonna pray this thing out. I contacted Dr. Nikki, Pastor James, and I was like, we need to have an impromptu. It wasn't our normal night for prayer, but I was like, we need to intercede on his behalf. And I wasn't trying to hear it.
Thank
So
God you there, because
lo and behold, the next thing I knew, I was hearing that you was up giving people heck, writing messages. You couldn't talk because you had the trait, but you was giving it to them. And I said, "That's my baby."
yeah, that I remember that experience very well, because I know, as sure as we're sitting here today, that I was somewhere betwixt and between. And uh, it was the most powerful vibration, feeling, notion. I know that I was not here, but I had not yet crossed over. Um, whew. But where I was sort of like a waiting area, and there were parts of it that I know that I and of a thought of going
Wait a minute, my
to,
phone
yeah,
is
I just saw something pop up. Hmm. It's like, now I know why that girl Candace on the Real
okay.
Housewives of
Good. I think we're
Potomac.
back in business. So,
Uh,
do you mind driving?
mm,
Mm, do you mind
um,
describing to us, if it's not too personal? Like, we know we saw you laying in that bed, but where were you in the spiritual or in the
okay, this is what I remember. I remember waking up, and I guess this was the time when I pulled the ventilator out of my throat. Okay, and what had happened is they were prompting me. Now this is after. No, this is not after. This was just before you came, because they had been practicing taking me off the ventilator for like
okay.
pods of time. So it'd be like, and the whole point was just to give people an understanding. I had to my aortic valve ruptured because of a virus that I had gotten in my heart back in January of last year, and it was due to a third bout with COVID-19. And because that's what my heart surgeon said, the time at which my body was most
Mhm.
susceptible and vulnerable to the pathogens that infiltrated the heart valve. Now, mind you, I'd already had a valve replacement 10 years ago. I had a bovine valve, and that is the valve that the virus infiltrated the second time, which is why it was determined that it would be best for me in getting this
Mm.
replacement that I would get a
Okay.
mechanical valve. Okay. Which is why you can now hear my heart ticking like a Timex, which is actually kind of cool in a way, because at least it reminds me that I'm still here. So we cut to the procedure, which was only
Mhm.
supposed to be a quick in and out. And he told me because this was my second time around, he was going to go in the very same incision that he went the first time. It was imperative that he do that. He was going to get in there. He was going to replace that valve with the mechanical valve, close me up, and I would be in and out of that hospital in at the most 7 to 10 days. Well, when he opened me up, they found that I had an aneurysm that had recently
Okay.
ripened at the base of my heart, which would have broken off and probably traveled into my heart, causing a fatal heart
Mm.
attack. So he cleared that up. Then he did what he needed to do with the valve, replaced that, and realized that not only the aortic valve, but the mitral valve needed replacing as well. So he replaced that one. And when he went over to the right side, he saw that my tricuspid valve had gotten all kinds of beaten up because of all of the extra work that it had to do for all of those months. I mean, because
Mm.
I was having all kinds of issues all throughout last year with my breathing, running through inhalers, thinking that my lungs were collapsing. But as it turned out, it was actually my
Mhm.
heart and not my lungs. But they're so interconnected. You know, they'll if your heart's not pumping properly, it will, it will create excess fluid that the lungs can't do anything with. So the fluid just kind of gathers around the lungs. And that's what causes the breathing issues, which made me think I needed more inhalers. But the inhalers weren't really doing the trick. So we get back to this place where he's in there, he's doing the surgery, he gets through, he realizes that the tricuspid valve needs repair. So instead of giving me a third valve replacement, he went into my left ankle, pulled an artery from there, and created a valve bypass to repair the tricuspid. So now all that's done. He's got me tidied up inside of like 10 and a half, 11 hours. But he couldn't stop the bleeding because of all of the scar tissue from the original incision. I wouldn't stop bleeding. So he kept me open, put me in a freezer bag, and basically tucked me away from that
Mm.
Wednesday to that Friday. Let my body, the bleeding stop on its own. And then he came back in Friday, closed me up, and then Saturday moved me to ICU and instructed the nursing staff to, revive me. Well, in reviving me, because I had been in that state for so many days, because I do also have COPD, my body was so used to getting all of that fresh, pure oxygen that I had gone into what they call a state of being snowed under. So it was going to take a little longer for me to wake up. But what ended up happening
Mhm.
is my lungs began to just get real lazy. They didn't want to work. They didn't want to do what they were supposed to do on their own. So they realized after a few days of me being pretty much non-responsive that they needed to put me on a ventilator. So that's where the ventilator situation came in. And I was on a ventilator, I guess, for about a good week or two. And then they realized that if they pulled me off of the ventilator, or at
Mhm.
least brought me up out of it enough, um, I could be a bit more coherent. But I was heavily drugged up throughout this process. And so what ended up happening is at one point, I guess somewhere betwixt and between with the Versed and the fentanyl and all those crazy drugs, I was having some crazy dreams. And then at some point, I felt like there was something in this area that I needed to have out. And I took it upon myself to remove myself from ventilation. And in so doing, I remember this so clearly. I immediately woke up, and my nurse, the sirens were going off and the lights were flashing, and the nurse came running in, and he was like, "What did you do? What are you doing? You can't take that out, Mr. Singletary." And I remember trying to speak, and nothing was coming out. And then when I tried to speak, and then I would try to draw in a breath, I couldn't.
Mhm.
And I literally was suffocating. And I just remember, like, mouthing, "I can't breathe." And I just sort of, everything went dark, and I felt bad. And it was at that point that my next cognizant memory was I was in some, like I said, it was like a room, and it was very dark, and there were people there. I felt presences of people, but the only outlines that I could get were them in fuchsia, like a fuchsia outline, almost like a comic book, because there were no faces, like discernible faces, but I could tell that was a female because she was, she had lashes and everything, but everything was outlined and highlighted
Mhm.
in fuchsia. And the next thing I know, these three people came in to that space, grabbed me, threw me down, sat on my back, and started to assault me. And that's really all I'm gonna say about that, in terms of what they actually did, because what they did to me was very much akin to a kind of a rape, a violation. And I remember I could hear them through the muffledness saying things about me and why they were doing what they were doing, and it was to get back at uh to teach me a lesson. And it was just weird, just very, very scary, very scary. And the next
Oh,
thing I
wow.
know, I was shifted around, and when I looked up, all I know is it was my grandmother who passed away in 1990, and she was also outlined in the fuchsia, and she was absolutely beautiful, and she literally just cleared whoever those miscreants were
Mhm.
away from me, and she reached down and grabbed me and pulled me out of it, and then I was awake. And it wasn't too long after that that the nurses were like,
Wow.
we didn't know if we were gonna Like we thought we lost you, and then they, told me about you having been there and me having this beautiful wife and so on and so forth. But now, mind you, the next day I had another distress because I developed two ulcers in my stomach that ruptured. So I had to have a 7 pint blood transfusion,
Mm.
and they were pushing blood into me from the side. And I remember seeing that. But at this moment, Wanda, this is where it gets a little comical because the Versed that they were giving me, this narcotic, had me thinking, based on what I had just told you, that whole situation being in that crazy room, having my grandmother rescue me from that scenario, and then I I just knew that these
Mhm.
nurses were witches, and they were giving me somebody else's blood. The one girl had a pouch on around her neck, and I swear,
Oh,
I
wow.
thought, sure. I said, that woman, she's carrying, that is a hex bag. These people are trying to kill me. I don't know what is going on, but now I still can't speak. I've got blood being pumped into me that is questionable its origin. I know that's not my blood. That's way too much blood for it to be mine. And then the next day, I wake up and they're telling me that they just put a tracheostomy
Mm.
into my neck because I couldn't eat and I could not breathe at the same time. So they needed me to be able to communicate because at this point, they were giving me a pad of paper and
Mhm.
an orange ink pen, which again lended itself to me thinking that they were witches and out to get me and they were stealing my voice. And at this point, the next thing I know, when I realized that, it was
So wait a
our
minute.
reality, excuse me.
1 second. 1 second, Jerome. Give me 1 second. We have LaShawn on with us. I believe I
Hello.
saw Aaron and Keisha Light. Um,
Well, hello.
and LaShawn said, "Oh my God, she said, God bless you, because she's had numerous bouts with COVID, and it's horrible. She's dealing with it now. LaShawn, I hope you feel better soon."
I hope you
And
feel
then
better.
she was
Godspeed to you,
commenting when
sweetheart.
you were talking about the ventilator. She said, "Oh my God, you deflated the balloon on the And she
Wow.
said, yes, you have to be weaned down from the ventilator. And she knows because she has a son that's in the hospital with some serious injury. So I'm sure she can definitely relate to a lot of what you're saying second-handedly. And then she said
Absolutely.
the concoctions of all of the strong medications will have you with these strange visions. And that's what I was getting ready to ask you. Do you think that they were really attacking you, or do you think that it was the medication playing with your mind?
At this point, Wanda, I do feel like, um, as assured as I was when we first discussed this, last month, I'm now not quite so sure because there are other visions and other memories that I have. Like
Mm,
I thought that the nurse took me to her house because they wanted to give me that tracheostomy procedure on a Saturday, and they weren't doing procedures in the regular hospital on Saturday. So she took me on the bus. Now, mind you, I'm strapped to the bed. I can't even move, but I'm riding the bus with the nurse. And the nurse took me to her house, and she was selling diamonds in the kitchen, while she was tending to me. And then her roommate came in, and they were doing porn in the kitchen. Just so I know that a lot of that were just constructs of Versed mixed with fentanyl mixed with propofol, because part of the weaning process on the ventilators, I'm sure LaShawn can can
mhm,
um, can attest to, is they give you the propofol to sort of to put you back under once you've had an hour today, 3 hours tomorrow, 4 hours, and that's what they were doing like every day. And I was posting this on Facebook that, today I was off the ventilator for 4 hours. Today I was off the ventilator for 6 hours. The whole point was they were trying to get me to the place where I could
Mhm.
do a full or as close to 24 hours off the ventilator. And that would be the time at which they knew my lungs could support no ventilation at all whatsoever. And it wasn't until I was there about 6 weeks, I hadn't been fed or able to was I wasn't given anything to eat or drink for 5 weeks. I lost almost 40 pounds. Which I ain't mad at. That part I ain't mad
Wow.
at. I'm not mad at that part.
Mhm.
Because I've been maintaining that. So that's pretty good. But a lot of that, yeah, I do think um, were constructs of very powerful narcotic medications mixed with just the fact that I think there was a rational part of me that kept saying to myself, of course, because I never saw my doctor again until the very end. It was not possible for me to have conversation with anyone in a
Mhm.
normal sense
Mhm.
until the very end. You know, I only got the speaking valve. I think that was like before my ninth, like I got the speaking valve and then I was discharged 9 days later. So that was almost 2 months in, um, other than being able to write notes to you guys
Wow.
on the paper.
Yeah.
It was very difficult. That was the part where I just felt very much like a passenger in the process in my recovery. No, there was no point at which anybody sat down with me and said, "Listen, this is
Mhm.
what's happening, and this is what we need to do in order to prevent or to, get you back in some form or fashion." None of that ever happened. It's on my end. Now,
Mhm.
what they told my aunt or my mom or my brother is, that didn't that I ain't had nothing to do with that. All
Or
I
your
know is
wife.
right, right, or my wife, right. I had nothing to do with what they was telling you. All I know is every time I was cognizant on some level, something new was going on with Jerome, and it just felt I I felt
Mhm.
very secondary. I didn't feel like I had any control or buy-in to my care, my recovery. And however,
Mm.
that being said, I ain't mad at it today because I spoke with my doctor on that last morning and we spent a good hour together and he broke it all down for me. And he was really in control the entire time. He was calling all of the shots and he was taking all of the preventive measures. And he
But
literally,
it would have been nice to have known that during the time.
it would have been it just for some, like I told my aunt, I said, I scribbled to her. She said, "Well, have you seen Dr. Griffin?" I said, "No. Have you?" She said, "No." She said, "I've called, I've left messages." Like, it just would have been nice had someone said, "He got you." That's it. But that didn't happen.
Mhm. To keep you
You
in the
know,
loop.
yes, yes,
And
because they,
Nicole said, "Praise God for grandmother." When you were speaking about how your grandmother came. Now, how has this experience changed you? How is your life different now?
wow. One, it's changed for the better in terms of I don't require all those inhalers. You know, I'm not running through 3 and 4 inhalers a month. I'm
Mhm.
using them like a normal person would. Um, I can walk up and down the stairs and not be winded. Or
Okay.
if I do get winded, All I have to do is sit for a second, and I can recover normally, naturally, utilizing my body's own resourcefulness and resources. And that is just a testament to the fact that the procedure was the remedy. This was not a band aid. This was the real deal recovery.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so for me at this moment, that is really, I mean, even look, I mean, I don't think my lighting is awful and forgive me for that. But, my aunt said to me the other day, she said, come here, let me look at your neck. And I went up to her. She said, you know what? I can't even tell that 3 weeks ago you were walking around here sticking your finger over a hole in your neck.
Because you had to
You,
trade.
yeah, even that. I mean, and that was crazy. That was really crazy. Like
Wow.
coming home and having a hole in my throat that unless I covered it, I couldn't speak. And even when I did speak, it was so breathy and uncontrolled, and it didn't sound like me.
Mm.
Um, and a lot of people have seen me from when I first came home to now, and they are just completely blown away by how quickly I've managed to sort of return to um, a bit of normalcy in terms of my look, my countenance, my constitution. Um, and that's a good feeling.
Mhm.
My brother said to me, he said, you look so sickly, even though we know what you've been through and which was a lot.
Mhm.
You looked so sickly when you first came out of the hospital versus now. He's like, it's hard to believe that a month ago you were just coming out of the step down from ICU at University of Maryland. And that is only God.
Mhm.
Only God. So
Right.
I feel very grateful and very blessed. And
And
that's another
that's
thing
where
that's
my
changed.
next question: how has your spiritual life changed since that?
Well, for one thing, I attend church now on a more regular basis. Um, I have a Bible app that sends me prayers throughout the day.
Mhm.
I've incorporated prayer into my daily routine. For a long time I stopped even saying grace before a
Mhm.
meal, and I've reincorporated saying grace into my. I'm at a space where at the age of 51 and having been granted another opportunity to live. I mean, because you know this is not my first time, coming to the
Mhm.
precipice in terms of it could have gone the other way. And one of my fraternity brothers, he was joking with me. He said, Jerome, you cheat death more
Right.
than Donald Trump cheats on his taxes. And it, I mean, okay, if you say it that way, I just feel that the good Lord above has seen fit to know and understand that for me, He has a purpose and a mission that has not yet been fulfilled on this plane, and I'm here for that, and I receive it. And so, what I'm
Mhm.
in the process
You
of
took the
doing.
words right out of my mouth. You what I was going to say, and guys, if you notice me and Jerome, there's a slight delay because I'm trying to make sure you guys don't get an echo. But when you've gone through all of that, you're here for a reason.
Yes,
Your life inspires someone. Someone is sitting back in the cut, maybe having to go through this exact same surgery or a surgery, and they are looking at how you've overcome and how you came through, and looking at your walk, physically and spiritually. Like God has you've had the surgery twice, and this second time I can attest to the fact that when I was there, the nurse told me it was a 50-50 chance.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't willing to accept that I was gonna lose my friend, and we got together and we pulled together and we had this group for Jerome that a few of us, about 8 to 10 of us from high school, we prayed weekly before his surgery and the
Yes.
days before his
Mhm.
surgery to
I
cover
get
him.
back to I'm
And
in you.
you are a walking
Yes.
miracle. I don't think
Thank
that
you.
you'll let your life be anything other than a testament to God. And then, also the fact that you're HIV positive and you're walking around like that used to be a death sentence. So,
Mhm.
way back when it first began. So
Yes.
let's talk about that. Um, how,
Well,
if you don't mind, if I ask something, anything too personal, let me know. If you don't mind, but how did you contract the disease? How did you find out about it? And how did you feel once you found out about it?
right. Well, um, goodness. Look, I gotta dig way back in the annals of the historical files for the how did I contract it? To be quite honest with you, I
They call
am
me
not a
Little
hundred.
Oprah, you know. They call
Yes,
me Little
I'm not
Oprah.
100% certain of this, but my what I keep being what I've usually said when asked this question is I used to date a man when I was in California. I used to work in the television industry, and I was also a huge uh, crystal meth addict with my ex, and the difference was he
Mhm,
used it intravenously with needles, and I
mhm,
smoked it, and he would be so messy
mhm,
with his needles. He'd leave a needle in the bed, unsheathed, what have you, that sort of thing. And one evening, and
mhm,
and and I know he was positive. I
mhm,
was not at that point, but one evening I went to put my hand on the under the pillow, and I pulled it back real quick because I had a needle stuck in the middle of the palm of my hand, and that was like in 2002.
Oh, wow.
And so I was so scared about contracting it that I literally went into a place of denial about it. I didn't want to know, but I just knew that that was it. And, cut 2 years later here in Maryland,
Mhm,
I was getting like ear infections and earaches and recurring colds and things that were happening. And so when I finally did get the diagnosis, which wasn't until 2007, several years later, I know that it had to be around that time because I had not gotten any
mhm,
sort of care. I had no acknowledgement of the disease at that particular point when I thought that I had contracted it. So what happened is my immune system,
mhm,
declined. So when I did finally get tested and found that I was positive, I came into the HIV scene with only 4 T cells. My viral load was like 6 million. So I came in at DEFCON 5, where my doctor was like, oh God, we got to put you on all sorts of prophylaxis because a bee could sting you and that'll kill you. You could catch a cold. Somebody could sneeze on you and that'll kill you. It it
wow.
it, it was that serious. I was on all sorts of antibiotics and different prophylaxis because I had four T cells. I mean, that was my immune system, four. And so there was a lot of issues.
Mm.
There was a coma back in 2013. There was, avascular necrosis. There have been bilateral hip replacements, knee replacements. Obviously, there was the first heart valve replacement. There have been a lot of consequences that I've had to endure and suffer as a result of not so much about contracting the illness, but because of my refusal to face it head on when I first thought that it was possible that I could be infected. And so one of the things that taught me is once I came through my first bout with lots of medical issues back in like 2013, 2014, 2015, that's when I endeavored to participate with the Greater Baltimore HIV Health Services Planning Council. I became a board member. I jumped on the Consumer Advisory Board for the Baltimore County Healthcare Access, which is a state
Mhm.
run program that, thank God, I became a part of because without them, I wouldn't have had access to the life saving drugs that they've been able to give me and help me to participate in free of charge. You know, um, there are so many programs here in the state of Maryland that
Wow.
provide for resources for people living with HIV/AIDS, or we call them PLWHAs. And it's my involvement with the community that has dialed me back in. And that's where my podcast, Positive Series, came from. It was my way of sort of shining a light on those of us in this game, in
Mhm.
this race, who decided, no matter at what point, we decided to take our test and turn it into a testimony and utilize this in order to thrive, not just survive.
Mhm.
And that's really where I sit. Very recently I have a friend that just tested positive and came to me because of the resources that I am connected to, and I have been so grateful that he chose to come to me, number one, because it really is a privilege to be able to allow another individual to
Mhm.
understand
Mhm.
that
Right.
this is no longer a death sentence. It does not have to be. There are certainly things that we must do in order to ensure that, because
Right.
it can be if you want it to be. You're this is a very powerful organ in our body,
Mm.
and it can bring about our demise, or it can bring about our absolute ascension and complete and utter transformation and renaissance. It really can. And I know for me, that's where I've endeavored to
I had
live.
a girlfriend. I had a girlfriend to Oh, I'm sorry. I had a girlfriend to share with me a couple, maybe 2 years ago now, that she was HIV positive. She is HIV positive. But what I can say is, in watching her, like she was scared. I was the first friend that
Mhm.
she trusted enough to tell.
Right.
And she said she was scared that it was gonna make me treat her differently. No, you're still my sister. And I know through her that with taking care of yourself and a proper medication, like she's no longer detectable.
Yes,
You
undetectable.
know, as long,
Hmm.
so it doesn't have to be a death sentence. You take care of yourself. I want to say hi to Carl and Lisa and my Bridget. Hi, my love.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you
Hello.
for joining me with Jerome Singletary, my walking miracle. He's had double heart valve replacement surgery. He's HIV positive, and he has a podcast called Positive, the series on YouTube. So we're just chopping it up and talking about his life, living and thriving instead of just existing.
Surviving. Yes, absolutely. And it's so important, you know. Um, and it's interesting because, you know, I'm still in heavy recovery mode for the don't let's I don't want to get it twisted. For as strong and powerful as I feel with respect to the heart surgery, I still have a huge um, hurdle and milestone to get through, and that is my cardiac rehab, excuse me,
Mhm.
which I begin next month in June at Northwest Hospital. I'll be going
Mhm.
there. And it's sort of like a physical therapy, which I've been doing as
Okay.
well, but it's very much geared to strengthening my heart. Because right now, I'm sort of like, I'm a little bit anxious and somewhat paranoid when
Mhm.
I hear it. You know, when I get exacerbated or anxious
Mhm.
or winded, that ticker, it's like it sounds like a bomb, you know. And I was somewhere, and a friend of mine was like, "Y'all hear that? Somebody, what is that ticking? What's going on?" I said, "Oh, don't worry. That's just me. That's me. I'm ticking." They're like, "Really?" And I had to put their ear up, and they were like, "That's your heart?" I said, "Yeah, yeah." So when I get excited or exacerbated in some way, it will it'll my heart will race,
Mhm.
which makes the ticking get louder, and maybe it's not so much that it gets so loud, but I can hear it in my ear, you know, and so that kind
Mhm.
of freaks me out. So I've spoken to the doctor, and he's like, no, he said that's one of the reasons why we
Okay.
want you to have the cardiac rehab, because that will help you to understand where you can push it to, what your limitations are, and so
Mhm.
that you won't be so afraid to hear that tick. Because that tick is actually a good thing. Because I asked him, I said, well, what happens if I don't hear it? He
Freaked
said,
out.
well, right,
Right.
it's out, it's done. So, you know, what I think another thing with respect to my podcast, I need to uh, get back to doing
Wait a
episodes.
minute. Nikki said, Nikki said, you take the licking and keep on ticking.
Yes, just like Timex, baby. Yes, just like Timex. And you know, I'm grateful. It's kind of neat to have a discernible measure, a marker that represents what I've just been through. That I can hear, that I can sometimes feel, that others around me, like my cat, will sometimes come and he will put his little head because he hears and he's wondering where it's coming from. Where is that? And he's so curious. And eventually he'll make his way over to my chest and
Right.
realize that it's somewhere inside. And he looks at me, looks up at me like, "You all right?" And I'm like, "I'm all right. I'm all right." And then he goes on about his
Oh,
business. Yeah. So I'm grateful.
right.
I'm grateful. I'm very blessed. um, I just give all the honor and glory to God, you know. And again, I'm so pleased with the fact that this has given me another opportunity to dial back in to my spiritual roots, to get back and reacquainted with the God of my understanding.
Mhm.
And and that's something that I know for me. I can only speak for myself, but I had lost
Right.
focus of. You know, when things are going well, you know, I had a good 3 what, from 29 September of 2019 up until this surgery, I had no surgeries, I had no hospitalizations, which between 2013 and 2019, I was in the hospital and having some sort of procedure done, not consecutively, but cumulatively during that 7 year period. I spent 3.5 years in hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to be able to come out in 2019
Wow.
and not have any more hospitalizations, no more surgeries, I honestly thought I had dodged a bullet. And then of course the pandemic happened and we were all on shutdown and lockdown and everybody was going crazy. I was like, oh, I'm fine because I was used to being
Right.
sequestered, in a room for months at a time. So for me, the lockdown was a good time. Like at least I got to
Mm-hmm.
be home and watch Showtime and Cinemax. You know what I mean? Because you didn't have that at the hospital. Best I could do would be VH1 and Bravo.
Oh, wow.
you know,
Right.
but I'm here for some Bravo. I like I enjoy my Housewives.
So now
Um,
tell us about your podcast, Positive the series.
well, uh, Positive the series. I began, and it's funny, Dr. Nikki. I have to give thanks to her again because she is part of a major reason why Positive even exists because I had gone to a doctor's appointment where I was just going to see about a hernia, and they were taking a long time to come in and see me. And finally, when they came in, a couple of doctors, not even speaking to me, was like, "Oh no, I'm not operating on him. This is not a good risk." And he never spoke to me. But then a black nurse came in and she said, "Well, Mr. Singletary, the issue is they've been looking at your file, your medical record on paper, which was at that point like 6,600 pages." And so they were like looking at what was in front of them on paper, black and white, but the person that was sitting in the office did not read like what they thought I was going to be like or look like or act like. I guess they thought I was going to come in there in a wheelchair and be all frail based on what they had been reading. But I came in at that point, I was 240 pounds, robust, walking in, my little overalls on, hi, hey, what's going on? So when she explained it to me,
Mm-hmm.
she basically was like, you are much sicker on paper than your countenance, your physical presence would suggest. So it's a bit misleading. And I remember leaving that appointment, and that was the first time anybody had ever said that to me like that. Mind you, I've got the most amazing ID doctor in Dr. Kambadi, and as sick as I have been, and as many harrowing situations I've been in, she's never come to me and said that out of her mouth. So when these doctors that I didn't know said that to me, it really cracked my face. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember calling Nicole when I got home. I don't know if it was she called me or I called her, and I told her what I had just experienced and lived through. And she said, "You know what, Jerome? I think you need, I appreciate you telling me this, but you need to turn your phone on, press record, and put this on camera." And I was like, why? Oh, okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. And that first post was 23 minutes. And I posted that. I don't even remember where I posted it. I think it was to Facebook, maybe it was to YouTube as well. But as it turned out, an old colleague and executive producer in Los Angeles, Matt Kunitz, who created Fear Factor on MTV, and he's got that show on TBS called Wipeout now, um, and he was a wonderful co-worker and colleague when I worked on The Real World and Road Rules and all those reality shows back in the day. He caught wind of that video and he reached out to me. I got a phone call from it was like Lionsgate Entertainment on the phone. I was like,
Mhm.
who's calling me from Lionsgate? And that's how Positive began. I spoke to him and he was telling me about his daughter who has a American Girl doll YouTube channel, and she's like 11 years old, or she was at that point, and she has made enough money to get through 4 years of college, 2 years of grad
Mhm.
school, an apartment, a car, all her books, and he's like, Jerome, he's like, you already know I'm a successful, executive producer. I and his wife is an amazing reality casting director, and he's like, obviously we could afford to, pay for her college ourselves, but she's made more than enough money to do it all by herself by YouTube. He's like, and I really think that you have something here, and I said, well, I don't know about the all the money or whatever because
Mhm.
HIV is it's not the American Girl doll. You know what I mean? It's not so funny. It's not so comedic. It's not the most entertaining milieu to try to bring lots of followers because you know I think I might have like maybe 300-400 subscribers at this point. However, what I do know is I've touched people all over the world, especially in Africa, which has made
Mhm.
the most positive
Mhm.
impact on me personally as a black man, as a gay man, as an HIV positive man. There are not very many people that look like me who are wearing those letters, those three letters, and putting themselves out there
Mhm.
in social media on public platforms. I have a very good friend in Mark King, who is a white gay man who has been doing what I've endeavored to do with Positive for many years. He's got books out. He's always on the cover of a magazine or what have you. But like even he told me, he said, Jerome, we don't have enough representation of people that look like you doing what I'm doing. And there are many more of you out here living,
Mhm.
breathing, walking, working,
Exactly.
talking with HIV than there are of me. And so don't let the fact that you don't have 30,000 followers, you know, um, thwart you from
The numbers
right,
deter you
right.
because you are a blessing to someone. If you putting yourself out there, others will feel comfortable coming forth and saying, "This is who I am, and this is what I have, and this does not define me."
No.
You
And
know.
so it's I'm sitting here and I'm processing because I haven't done I've done one new little I did one blog post when I was in the hospital about a month and a half ago where they were walking me through the how to operate and utilize the trach. And I posted that and that's the first post that I've done for my
Mhm.
show in probably about a year and a half, and I kind of got off the track of doing Positive because I got the little piece of job with the health department working in COVID accessibility because a lot of us black and brown folks were being denied access to
Mhm.
the vaccines. And then once they were given carte blanche access, they didn't trust it, which rightfully so. And so I worked to get people connected and attached to the COVID
Hi,
vaccine.
Andrel. Welcome in,
And
sis.
that's what sort of diverted my attention and my focus. And so now that I'm sitting here with you on your illustrious podcast, I think that what I need to do is remember my roots, remember what Nikki said to me when I did that back in April of 2017 or 2018. I can't quite remember which year that was. Um, is to start doing some posts because my show had sort of become an opportunity for me to meet other HIV positive people who were doing like what I'm doing, which is taking those lemons and making lemonade.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where I was endeavoring to go. But
You have a
maybe,
purpose, my brother, and
yeah, because I think
you had
maybe I
a
need to bring
purpose,
it back
and
to
you
me.
got sidetracked. You got sidetracked, and all of this happened to refocus you because just like I said with my podcast, I look to empower, uplift, motivate, inspire, and encourage. So
Um,
you do the same thing. You don't know so many people are living in secrecy with their
yeah,
status because they're afraid of the stigma. Some people still see a stigma. You live out loud. And
I think
the
so.
one thing I'm gonna say, because there are days that I don't feel like doing this, I don't feel well. Like tonight, I don't feel well, but people come in my inbox and they tell me that this podcast makes a difference. So even if it's one person in a
Yep,
month or
yep,
whatever, or one person in two
absolutely.
months, as long as I know I'm touching the life of somebody, as
Yes.
long as I have breath in my body, I'm gonna be here every Wednesday at 8 because this
You're
is my
fulfilling your
purpose.
purpose. Yes.
And you have to
You're
live up to
fulfilling
your
your
purpose.
purpose.
God has spared your life. And like Nicole said, now is the time. God
Yes.
has spared your life for a reason. You have purpose, my brother. And you
Yeah.
have to live up to that. He didn't give you this second, third chance, fourth chance for
16.
nothing.
Right. And I received that. And you know, I can show you better than I can tell you. I can show you better than I can tell you. And I'm gonna leave it at that for now. But I will say
Amen.
stay
Amen.
tuned. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Stay tuned, because I've made a lot of excuses. I'm like, oh well, I ran my licenses for my Microsoft Office, waned, and so my computer's acting funny, and I was like, oh, and then my camera, my little HD camera, is giving me the blues because I can't get it back on the little stand, and oh, I'm gonna have to get another one of those, and then oh, I'm not working a part-time job, so I don't have that extra income. Like I have made more excuses than Carter has liver pills as to why I have not done another blog post since the one I did in the hospital last month. And no more excuses. No more excuses. So I have you to thank for that, because I knew that coming and
I mean, if
endeavoring
you need
to
an
participate with
accountability
that.
partner, you're looking
Yeah.
at her.
Oh, I know that. And more than just accountability, just having you, like when you checked in on me last week, because you felt that you hadn't heard from me, and my behaviors, my habits. So if you're not seeing me posting and what have you, that I might be, and I told you I was, in a bit of a funk, and it happens, and it's because it's something as simple as n- not having as many doctor's appointments to go to, and being out there and running around and being out and about. Something that simple put me in a little bit of a depression because I was like, well, I don't have anything on the schedule. Well, guess what? I have a whole podcast that's sitting there waiting for me.
Mhm.
So I receive that. I do. I do. I receive it. I got to
Exactly.
I have to make. I have to do something about it. So
You have a message for the world, and the world needs to hear it. Yes, you do.
yes, yes.
So I'm not going to wear my brother out tonight. We're going to get ready to bring our segment to a close. Of course, I got a plug Playing and Makeup by Yolando, the Church Girl palette, which is the palette that I've used tonight. And this is for my more conservative queens. This is the palette that I've used tonight. And if you go to playing and makeup by Yolando.com and use my code Wanda, WANDA, you can save you some coins at checkout. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to watching Wanda's World on Wednesdays at 8 p.m.
God bless you.
Jerome, I want to thank you so much for coming on and being open. I didn't write any questions down because I wanted our interview to be as authentic as possible.
I hope I
And you
didn't remember.
open book, and I can ask whatever I want, which I thank you for
Absolutely.
because so many people don't ask me about that. So thank you because someone out there, whether they let you or I know,
Right.
needed to hear what you had to say.
Yes.
And whether they see it
Absolutely.
today, tomorrow, 6 months from now, someone is going to click on this link and they're going to receive a piece of something that they needed.
Yes. Absolutely.
And I
And I'm
thank
here for
you.
it. And I thank you. And I love you forever. Forever and ever. Ever and ever. And I thank all of your followers and your listeners
I love
for
you too.
tuning
I
in.
love you too,
You
babe.
know,
All right. So okay, so Andros, she agreed with me. She said absolutely, and we had quite a few people. At one point we had like 10 people on. Right now we're saying we have 5 people on. I've shared the link, and when we get off, you can share the link as well, and everything. And we're just gonna keep putting it out there because I think this has been one of the most important interviews that I've done.
thank you. Well, I'm glad to have been able, and I'm humbled. More importantly, I'm humbled to have been a part of it. So, thank you, thank you, and thank you for giving me the kick in the butt I needed. So, again, that's God.
All right.
You know, he works. He works wonders through you. You know
Anytime.
that,
That's
right?
what sisters are
You
for.
know
Excuse me. That's what
that,
your wife is for.
right? Right. My beautiful wife. Yes. I was like, wife.
I heard that
Wow.
before.
I was like, not only this like yes,
Oh,
this why I done jumped the fence. I done got married. I
what
done caught a
wife?
wedding. I love it. I love it. I'm here for it. Okay, I'm here for it. Well, God bless you, Wanda, and thank you so much.
And Nicole said, "Thank you, Jerome.
Thank you.
God bless you too, brother. And I'll be talking to you soon." And Andrell said, "Thank you, Mr. Singletary, and may continue
Thank you.
blessings to you always."
You got
And
it.
with
Thank
that, I'm
you.
going to say peace and blessings. And
Yeah,
as you go about your day, if you see a queen and her crown is a little bit tilted, please help that queen to straighten her crown. If it has
absolutely.
fallen off of her head, please help her pick it up and put it back on her head. And if she's lost it, misplaced it, it's been
Yeah.
stolen, please help her get a new one. Please help her
Amen.
search for it. If you have a few extra coins, help a
Right.
sister out.
Help
But
a
at the
sister out.
same time, when you do these things, zip your lip. Feel no need to
Yeah.
tell the next person what you did to help that
That's
queen.
it. That's
Sometimes
it.
we need a safe place, a port in the storm, and we don't need to hear our business regurgitated back to us
On
from
the
a source that
streets.
we didn't give it to you. And with
Amen.
that, I'm going to sign out. Peace and blessings. I love you, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
I love you. Good night.
Mwah. I love you too. And now I'm trying to end the stream. There we